two different homes that where we roomed together as we traveled back and forth to our home states in Kansas and Mississippi. I have 6 grandchildren under 6. He has 5 under 5, and Kelsey, his daughter, works here at Ogan Levels, so it's great. Her husband, Sean, it's great for y'all to be here. So it's a family and a friend reunion. Yeah. So Jerry, come on up and we'll start our conversation. Thank you for coming.
Chip, thanks. I'm glad to be here. Chip's right. We've known each other now 28 years because we were elected to the House of Representatives the same year, and Chip was a star of our class and highly regarded and enjoyable to be with. But he really was the telecom, having had worked for Senator Trent Lott in the Senate in the mid 1990s. He was the telecom expert, and his life, and as I was observing, revolved around the Commerce Committee and telecommunications. And so I'm a fan and friend, but I'm also recognizing Chip's capabilities, and you're lucky to have him involved in your professional lives.
Well, thank you.
Now I'm leaving.
Jerry, tell everybody the committees you serve on, the breadth and the depth and the diversity of issues you address. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the things that are most important to our member companies as it relates to broadband, the broadband grant, broadband deployment, all the different support programs that are building into your small towns and rural communities across Kansas. Kansas really, we have one of our member companies, Idea Tech, which is a star among fiber emerging companies that have been growing and building in Kansas. The Kansas Broadband Office, always on the forefront of best policies and practices. But if you would talk a little bit about all the committees you serve on, because your different jurisdictions are very important to us.
Well, this allows me to remind Chip that I need to be able to walk out the door at about 10 o'clock because I chair the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. And so fully engaged in issues. And at the moment, with the suggestion that 83,000 people should find a job someplace else, what should be an easy job in chairing a committee has become a much more difficult one. And a place that was void of partisanship, the stage has been set for even that committee now to become much more difficult. In addition to that, in your world, I'm on the Commerce Committee. I would tell you that I guess I don't want to say anything that would suggest that it should be otherwise, but Deb Fisher, now the chairman of the Telecommunications Subcommittee of Commerce, I was expecting that to be my job, but then Mitch McConnell took back the Rules Committee chairmanship that took that away from Deb Fisher, and it made her eligible to do that in the Commerce Committee. So I chair a subcommittee in Commerce on aviation and space. And that also has some bearing upon the telecommunications world. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee, where I chair the subcommittee on Commerce. Appropriations for the subcommittee has jurisdiction over the Department of Commerce, also Justice and Science. And so in the Commerce world, I think the only member of the Commerce Committee who's also a member of the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the Department of Commerce. And so, again, a lot of efforts in the past and in the future in trying to make sure that what NTIA and others in the Commerce Department do are something that is beneficial to the effort to expand broadband opportunities. I am also a defense appropriator in that world. And again, sometimes those two things, particularly when it comes to spectrum, have some consequences. I'm a 2-year member of the Senate Committee on Intelligence. And that's a new dimension in my life. So 2 days a week, I sat behind in a skiff and listened to the intelligence community tell us the seriousness of what everybody's doing to do damage to our country. I slept better before that committee assignment. The challenges are real. This list keeps going. I'm a member of the Indian Affairs Committee, and I'm a member of the Committee on Agriculture. I've tried to have as many committees as I can get, and I probably have more committees than any senator in the Senate in order to play in the as many arenas as possible. Having said all that, I came to Washington, D.C. at the time. Chip came from Mississippi. I came from Kansas. And what I really am about is trying to make sure that rural America, rural Kansas in particular, has a future. I'm a small town Kansan kid. My hometown probably has about 1,800 people today, less than it did when I was a kid. And I used to tell people in my days of getting acquainted with Chip and our colleagues, I come from a place where economic development can be whether or not there's a grocery store in town. And it's still true. And so my roots and my passion is what can I do to make sure that the places that I came from, the place I came from, and that many others do across the country is around for a long time to come. And so what I tell Kansans and have told them for years, I'm about in this, I wouldn't always put this at the top of the list, but I will here. I'm about technology and broadband. I'm about keeping the hospital doors open. I'm about trying to make certain that small business has a future, trying to make sure that agriculture producers are doing well, and trying to make sure the federal government doesn't mess in our education system in a way that diminishes the chances that we can educate and raise our kids. So a lot of what I'm about, and a reason that we focus on broadband deployment, is I want rural America to have a bright future.
You know, as I listen to Jerry, I also know, and he travels to every county in Kansas, which is a big state and a lot of small towns, a lot of small courthouses. But every year he goes to every place in his state. He is probably, I shouldn't give him the ego boost of saying he's probably the most popular senator in all of the Senate in his home state.
That actually is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, by polling, is the most popular senator among his constituents of all 100. So it is not me.
And are you second?
No. But I do spend a lot of time in Kansas, and I never moved here, and our family, Kelsey this daughter over here was 8. Her younger sister was 6 when I came to Washington, D.C. And we decided we wanted to raise our kids in that setting, not this one. And so for 28 years, I've been on an airplane almost every Monday and every Friday, about 40-some weeks out of the year. So transportation is also kind of important to me as well.
I know that you have to go back to the Hill and chair the committee. Real quickly, you have sponsored and are the author of a piece of legislation very important to our member companies, especially those who are using BEAD to build out to the unserved, underserved parts of our country, that would make sure that the broadband grant that a company like Idea Tech or any of our other member companies may receive is not subject to that grant fund or that grant funding being taxed. How does it look? And can we get it in the reconciliation? And, you know, the logic of this, if we were to give, you know, a grant, let's say of $10 million to Idea Tech to build into a small town, Kansas, and then they're taxed at 30%, you're just taking that away from the mission of the grant program in the first place of connecting every person in Kansas and every person in America to a good, reliable, fast, high capacity broadband connection.
So this one ought to be an easy one if you thought that members of Congress had any common sense. And if we do, we'll be successful in getting this legislation passed. So it was a surprise to me. I don't know that I thought about it, but a couple of years ago, we found that broadband grants are subject to income tax. And so $1 million grant, I don't know, 20-some, Chip says 30% of that money then is taken away from the company that got the grant in taxes. And that's just crazy. I mean, a long time ago when I was practicing law in a small town in my part of Kansas, the mental health group came in to tell me that they were subject to sales tax. So here's a local unit of government that provides mental health services to a lot of constituents in rural Kansas. And when they buy something, they pay sales taxes. And so one of the first things I did as a young lawyer was go to the legislature and get the sales tax, get them exempt from sales taxes. So that's like, what a silly way of doing business is provide government money, taxpayer dollars, and then take a significant portion away when they spend it. So the CHIPS question is what's our chances? This is a bipartisan effort, good sponsorship. Mark Warner is the lead Democrat, a member of the Finance Committee. And I've certainly had conversations with our Republican members of the Finance Committee. Chip's question about is reconciliation a possibility? What I would say is reconciliation is probably the only possibility. And so it needs to happen there. It's a modest amount of money, a few $100 million, 400 and some $million. It wouldn't want Kansans. If there's any Kansans in the room, I don't think $400 million is a lot of money. But in the overall scheme of reconciliation, it's a small portion. And we are working hard. We'll be working diligently to see if we can to make sure, that's a better way of saying, we get those provisions included to reduce the taxation on broadband providers. Another way to make certain that the dollars that we're spending in broadband deployment are spent in a way that are efficient and effective. What a sad circumstance this will be for our country if at the end of the day, after all the money that has been put in recent years, in the last 5 years in particular, the last decade, but certainly in the last 5 years, if after all that investment, we still have so many people, or anybody perhaps, that still has inadequate broadband services, and what a detriment that is generally to rural, but what a detriment it is to families and educating our kids and seniors. I mean, just individual people are at a great disadvantage. So every dime that we appropriate, every dime that's part of a grant program ought to go to the mission of the grant, which is to make sure you all have the opportunity to fully provide broadband services to people across the country, rural and centers of cities, and the difficult places in the country to provide that broadband service. We need to get that done, and this is one way we can focus attention on making certain that the dollars go where we thought they were going in the beginning.
Tomorrow our member companies are going to be going and visiting around the Hill, and one of the key things that we're going to be asking for support is for your legislation on this. I want to be sensitive to your time, so I may combine a few questions into one.
As he won't shorten my answers.
As you heard the breadth of his responsibilities on committees, it is extremely important to understand that his role both on Commerce Committee, on the authorizing, and on the appropriation gives him probably the greatest influence and double influence over both the creation of policy, but then the funding of policy. And I can tell you, if he ever calls the chairman of the FCC, because he has the power of the purse, the chair of the FCC listens, the head of the NTIA listens. So as we look at possible BEAD reforms and streamlining and permitting and all of the issues that we care about, no one is in a better position to have influence. And so as we look at what states are doing and how do we, the $42.5 billion was authorized, it is at the doorstep. A number of rules we're looking to streamline, doing all of the above approach on technology neutral to get as much as possible shovels in the ground and to speed BEAD. Any thoughts on how we can best do that?
Absolutely. And we assisted Kansas and our state director of broadband in getting in BEAD early, but it didn't really matter because nothing then followed. So we were approved and then nothing. And clearly the focus, there's been a lot of national attention on the failure of deploying the funds under BEAD to make certain that broadband is deployed. And I think we're in a different environment than the last administration, a different cabinet secretary. I've had these conversations. It's one of the good things about being a senator is that the cabinet secretary comes to you asking for confirmation, me to vote for his, in this case, his confirmation. And it gives you this moment, this half hour or so to say, well, yeah, I probably will vote for you, but can I enforce upon you? Can I make certain you understand the decisions that have been made in this case, the BEAD program have been such that we're not spending any of the dollars to actually do broadband deployment. And he has indicated, as you've read or seen, his belief that we should eliminate those kind of impediments that are unrelated to broadband deployment, but are more social policy issues from the BEAD program, and again, make it more affordable and less restrictive for small companies and large companies to provide broadband services through BEAD. So I think that's something that will change from the past administration to this administration, and it's something that we will clearly be reminding the secretary of our conversation, but also making sure when it comes to the appropriations hearing and the secretary is there or NTIA is in front of us looking for money, you got to change what you're doing. And I think we're on that path.
One last question before you have to go. You straddle the worlds between the defense community and the wireless, and many of our companies need more spectrum. Big question is the DoD spectrum in the lower 3. Your good friend Deb Fisher and you know, blessed are the peacemakers, for they have all been shot. Is there?
I was going to compliment you on knowing the Bible.
Is there a way that and later Brendan Carr, chair of the FCC, is going to come. He's going to talk about the spectrum pipeline. And what are your hopes that we'll eventually get an agreement on spectrum authorization and looking at some of the DoD spectrum for sharing and for higher, better use?
You all may know better than I do what the administration, the Department of Defense, what the Trump administration at the White House is thinking about this issue, and that will be important. But I think it is this, Chip used the word straddle, and I think this is the thing that we've got to do. And I would highlight that in my view, while we need to make certain that our defense agencies have access to the spectrum they need, our country's economic, but also our national security posture is determined by the capability of using that spectrum in the economy generally and in technology in particular. So it's not all, you know, it's not everything is just defense when we're talking about the Defense Department. Our economic viability, our capability of competing with China, all of that is determined by our technology programs, our technology ideas, and access to spectrum. And I've been involved in spectrum issues. None of them are easy. We've carved out a bit of effort to make sure there's unlicensed spectrum, but we just keep trying to find enough and to make certain that we're capable of competing in a global economy.
One last thing, and I promise I'll let you go and chair your committee. Kansas is an energy state. Earlier today, we had a panel where we had a SMR, small modular nuclear reactor. We had Williams Company, the largest natural gas pipeline company. You're a natural gas state, data center company, traditional telecom, broadband, fiber companies. AI is bringing to the data center this energy revolution with fiber connectivity and data center and AI revolution simultaneously. Any thoughts on all of the above, energy and how both energy, data centers, and fiber permitting reform to speed and win the race to AI in the future and to beat China? Do we have a good chance on permitting reform this Congress?
I mean, I think the nature of Congress has changed as a result of the election. The nature of the administration has clearly changed as a result of the election, and less regulation. I mean, a lot of what we're doing, it seems like I've spent most of my time in the Senate doing confirmations, which is not what I wanted to do in the Senate. It is like consuming our time. It certainly was true in the Biden administration. We were still doing, as President Biden was walking out the door, he still had confirmations in front of the Senate. And now we're doing the same thing. We're starting over. I'd like to be more involved in policy, although people matter. And this administration, and excuse me for interrupting myself, and the point I would make is we're doing CRAs repealing past regulations, and they're very prevalent and common on the Senate floor. So we're undoing a lot of past regulations, and I think that also bodes well for less regulations being promulgated in the beginning, in the past or the future in this administration. I'm on all of the above. We generate and use a lot of energy in Kansas. Panasonic, incidentally, has announced and has built, and we'll cut a ribbon here in a few weeks, an electric battery, not a vehicle, electric battery plant that employs 4,000 people. The energy needs of that one plant meant that the coal-fired plant that our local provider was going to shut down had to be kept in service to provide energy to a battery plant. I think there's a bit of an irony there. But the idea that we had to get rid of stuff now is the opposite. Now we have to add to. And our Evergy, which is our electric provider in the state of Kansas and Missouri, in this office and talking about for now a long time, the level of consumption of power in the states was pretty constant. Now it's rising dramatically. 3 data centers apparently coming to the Kansas City area. So the need for energy is growing. It also is really important in our national security and what we're doing, what we, in my view, need to be doing in Europe to strengthen the European community in their efforts to keep Russia within its borders, to make sure that we are providing energy, liquefied natural gas to them. I come from the oil producing county in Kansas is the one I grew up in, and it is just all of that is hugely important, and energy matters greatly to our country's future and will require demand for more technology all the time. We have a nuclear reactor in Kansas that provides us service. It doesn't seem like the technology is there for that to grow, but maybe some of the small, more individualized nuclear reactors is something that's going to be prevalent.
We have a new SMR company in our membership that we'll send to you for Kansas.
Okay. Yes, you're here. I'll talk to you instead of my daughter. Recruit you, and then I'm going to recruit her to come home.
Yes.
Incidentally, IdeaTech, and I don't know whether anybody's here from IdeaTech today, but it is one of your members, and I just happened to be there last Friday, unannounced, walked in the door and visited with them. I then went to the local bakery. Daniel, who's their CEO at IdeaTech, was not there when I was there, but I went to the local bakery because they told me they had the best coconut cream pies in the state. And I thought I'd surprise my wife with a coconut cream pie. I walk in and the lady who owns the bakery says, "No, we're out of pies today. Daniel just bought the last coconut cream pie." So I'm not as pleased with IdeaTech as I was before my visit.
Jerry, I can't thank you enough for your friendship, for the work, your service. I rest a little bit easier at night knowing that you're there and trying to continue from the institutional and the congressional and the constitutional responsibilities that you take so seriously.
It's really important.
And so I thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.